Thank you. Thank you, Michael. It's good to see you. Again, my name is Ryan Hutchinson. I serve at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, but I also serve as a lay pastor at Open Door Church in North Raleigh. And I just want to say, it's great to see this crowd that's here today to talk about this particular topic, but I want to say thank you to you for the service that you give to your local churches here in this community. I know that sometimes that can be a thankless job, but I know that you're laboring for the Heavenly Father to please Him, and so thank you for your service in those particular ways, and thank you for the support that you have in coming here today to be a part of this particular event. Now, just as a raise of hands, how many people here have interacted with an AI tool? All right, good number of you, good. All right, how many people then have never interacted with an AI tool? All right, so nowadays it's becoming more common. A matter of fact, worldwide now there's over 500 million unique weekly users of AI tools that are there. And so therefore it's a very common tool. And there's a cartoon that I saw early on. Let's see here. There we go. All right. That kind of sums up how it is that happens in the AI world, and that is you've got one guy that has a thought on one side, and he says, how can I take this one bullet point, and how can I turn it into kind of like this full-fledged email? And then you have the other person on the other side that gets that and says, how can I take that email and summarize it into one bullet point? And so it's kind of funny that how it is that we interact with these in these particular tools. One of the things to keep in mind is that the people in your churches are using AI on a regular basis, and believe it or not, in 2025, Harvard Business Review put out some statistics on how people are using AI. And from an individual perspective, and this is scary that this is happening, but from an individual perspective in 2025, the single highest use of AI was for therapy and counseling. So that means you have people in your church who are going to an inanimate object, a computer, and asking it for life advice. And so that's something to always keep in mind from a ministry perspective, because what's happening is the people in your pews are lonely. They don't want to interact with somebody who's going to share with them the struggles or wants to share with them the struggles that they're facing. And so they find it easier to go to this particular tool that is not an individual, that is not thinking in a way that God would want them to think, and is there. And so therefore always keep that in mind, especially when you're thinking about things with application. Within your sermon as to how it is that people are interacting with those particular tools. I want to give you a little bit of terminology when it comes to AI tools in the area, and these are going to be very high level that's here. But what we're working off of right now is something called generative artificial intelligence. What's my best way to be able to describe what generative artificial intelligence is? It's simply statistics at scale. That's all it is. Right now, it's guessing the next best word based on the context that it's working in. And so that's what it's doing. Now, there's all kinds of thoughts about when can we get to a sentient state with artificial intelligence. Quite honestly, I think there's good reason to think that we'll never actually get to that rate. It's just going to get faster at its statistical analysis on how it's giving these particular answers that are there. But ultimately, what's happening is it's guessing the next best word. It's kind of like this. If you know your spouse, sometimes she'll start a sentence or he'll start a sentence and you're able to finish it. You can kind of guess what's coming next because of the context that's there. That's essentially what's happening when it comes to these particular AI tools and the data that they're trained on. And those data exist in something called an LLM, and that's a large language model. That basically it takes all of this data that's available out here, books and other resources, and basically ingest all of that information to help it in that process of guessing what the next best word is to be used. Now, the way that you typically interact with these AI tools, when you pull it up, if you go to ChatGPT or to Claude or to Gemini or any of these other tools, you have this little window there where you put in a prompt, and that's a chat bot. That's what that window is that you're going to. Any of those times, whether you're on a help site for a particular organization or you're on one of those sites itself, you're interacting with a chat bot that's now interacting with the large language model that is on the back end. Now, one of the things that have started to really come forward in 2025 and are even more prevalent in 2026 that you hear is the term AI agents. And the way what AI agents are is you think of them as basically digital employees. They do certain things. They're trained to do certain things, and through machine learning are able to, from a contextual standpoint, learn what they're doing and process certain things. They're really good at things like repetitive work, things along those lines. And so in other words, they have a huge impact on being able, from an employment standpoint, to be able to create more productivity, less error in these different areas. And this particular area of the AI world is going to continue to increase, where you're going to see the use of these AI agents that are more. And there's, as a matter of fact, some companies that are hiring individuals that their sole job is just to manage a series of AI agents. That's what they're doing, to make sure that they're doing the things that they are actually tasked to do, because it's still not perfect that's there, and it's never going to be perfect from that standpoint. And so therefore having the human in the loop. Now, the major AI platforms that are out there, some of these you are probably familiar with. ChatGPT is the largest. It was one of the first ones to really come forward with a public model that's here. Claude has recently, and as a matter of fact, it's more of a favorite among the coding community. Claude is an excellent AI tool that's there. Gemini is Google's product. You have Grok, which is the product that's put out by xAI, which is Elon Musk's company. Then you have the Llama models, which are owned by Meta. That's the whole Facebook, Instagram kind of world that's there. And so those are, when you interact with those particular platforms, that's what you're interacting with many others. As a matter of fact, Microsoft, even yesterday at their Build conference, just announced that they have their own what they call MAI models that they're releasing to compete against these particular LLMs that are supposed to run faster. And this is what everybody's doing in this particular world with these companies, is they're trying to come up with a faster model to be able to address different situations that are there, and that's what it is that you interact with. So most people are probably most familiar with ChatGPT and Claude, but then behind that quickly is going to be Gemini and things like Grok. Especially if you're on the X platform, you'll interact with Grok quite a bit. You can ask Grok questions. You can do things along those lines to be able to interact with those tools that are there. Now, when you interact with a chatbot, you have to, the quality of the information that you put into it is going to affect the quality of the information that you're going to get out of it. So think of it like talking to another person, but I want you to be careful. Don't ever get into a place where you actually think you're talking to another person, all right? I do my best whenever interacting with AI tools to not use the personal pronoun you when asking it to do something, because I find that that helps me remember I'm not talking to a person, because sometimes you'll get caught up in what's going on. And so just an encouragement that's there. But just like you're having a conversation with your child and you ask them to do something, the more specific you are, the more information that you can give and the instructions that you have, sometimes the better the response that you're going to get out of it. And this is called the prompt. So when you're on the chat bot, you're putting in a prompt, and there's a whole new world of job opportunities that are opened up out there that are that's called prompt engineering. Prompt engineers, basically people that know how to properly form prompts and interact with AI tools to be able to get that information. So a simple way that I have that's out there, there's all kinds of these models that exist when it comes to how it is that you can think about the different parts of the prompt that you enter, is I use the word format. How do you format a prompt? Well, the first thing is you're going to frame it with a context. You're going to basically tell it who you are, what's the ministry that you're associated with, these kinds of things, to be able to give it a context that it's focusing on. Next, you're going to outline its roles. This is kind of one of the most powerful things that you can do with an AI tool is tell it what kind of role it's playing within that particular context. And I'll give an example here in just a minute. Next is your restrictions. This is setting boundaries. So instead of just wide open, whatever the response is, you give it some kind of guardrails that it's doing. So for example, many times when I'm interacting with it from a ministry perspective, I give it guardrails of evangelicalism, conservative Southern Baptist, even tying into the Baptist faith and message and other core doctrinal statements to give it a restrictions in which it's to operate. Then you also have your model for your audience. It's describing who is it that this output is designed for. Is it designed for me? Is it designed for our pastors? Is it designed for our church members? Is it designed for the general public? So giving it some sort of audience that it's doing. Then you're going to assign it a task. That's the A. Tell it what it's supposed to do. And then tune it with follow-up. Here's the thing. Interacting with AI tools is an iterative process. There's never going to be a situation, or most situations, it's not going to be a time where you put in one prompt and you get everything that you want. It's an iterative process where you're going kind of back and forth with the information you're receiving to really tune that information and be able to make it exactly what it is that you want. A lot of people get frustrated because they go in, they ask a very simple prompt and like, that's not what I want, that's not helpful. And that's because, one, they're not approaching the prompt correctly, but they also think that it's just a one-shot opportunity, that I'm going to post this once and get the information that I need there. So let's talk about how it is that this can be an example that you would use. Let's see here. There we go. All right, so let me give a context here from evangelism research. So an example of a weak prompt, a very simple one, would be, give me evangelism ideas for my church. All right, let's think back to that format. One, I've not given it any kind of frame in which it's working in. I'm not giving it any kind of role that it's serving. I'm not saying anything about the audience that's here. And so what's a way that we could then make that prompt stronger to be able to improve the information that we're getting? Well, I've got an example here. I pastor a church of 120 in a rural NC town. Our average members is 58. Our community is growing with younger families. I'm using this in the triangle example. We want to reach our neighbors, but honestly feel stuck. Give me 8 practical, low-barrier evangelism ideas with one sentence explaining why each fits our specific event. All right? That prompt is going to give you a much better quality response than the first one's going to be. And so realize there are things that are going to help you from an AI perspective to make it faster and make you more productive, but it's not necessarily an easy button where you just hit it and all the answers come out like it is. All right, so there's a process that you are working through with this. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide if we could. Sorry about that, Nico. Yep, thanks. All right, so let's talk about how it is that you can also use this. You can also use this from what's called a deep research mode. Most of the time you're going to need a paid account, which usually they run about $20 a month for these particular tools. I will tell you some of the information that you're able to get from this. $20 a month is not much compared to what you would be paying for in other places to be able to have access to some of the information that's available here. And so deep research is something where it goes through and it just doesn't simply use its information in its large language model, but actually searches a bunch of sources to be able to give you a full-on report back. So for example, let's say you were looking to do this from a demographic standpoint. It's able to take, this is going to take generally, depending upon the prompt that you put in, about 5 to 15 minutes to be able to get a response back. And it will produce a full-fledged report. Sometimes, depending upon the details that you're asking, it could give you a 15, 20-page report when it comes to the information that it provides. It's going to give much standard or much deeper answers than a standard chat that's here. And it's also available in not only ChatGPT and their Plus, but their Gemini Pro models, Claude's models, and others that you paid for with that extra access that's here. So, for example, let's use it for demographics for a church. So let's say you can look at a particular situation with a church and you can say, I want to know population trends around my city. I want to know age, income, household demographics, dominant employers, the religious landscape, neighborhood growth or decline indicators. All right, so you can have this kind of information that you can have it do research for you that you're going to get in 5 to 15 minutes that you might have subscribed to someplace else for that particular information and would have taken a long time to be able to get that feedback that's there. And so this is one example here. So Nico, let's go to the next slide if we could. So let's talk about then also your church and how it is that it interacts with the AI tool. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide here for something called generative engine optimization. Now, who's ever heard of, with your church website, something called search engine optimization? All right. Search engine optimization was basically, it was a tool to be able to interact with search tools like Google and others to make sure that your information for your church is findable when somebody's doing a Google search. Well, generative engine optimization is similar to search engine optimization, but it's so that AI tools that are looking at your website are able to understand and provide the information that's necessary, or the information that's helpful for the person that's going to do it. At our church at Open Door in Raleigh, over this past 3 months, there have been at least 5 people that we've interacted with that we have said, how did you find out about Open Door? And the answer was, I used an AI tool to do the research on what churches that I should visit. Your website might not be set up to be optimized for generative engine interaction, for AI interaction. It might be set up from a search engine standpoint, but not from a generative standpoint. And so you can actually use these tools to basically look at your website and help you with things like, is my mission clear on my website? Act as a visitor and you're looking at visiting my website. What information is missing from my website? You can actually have it evaluate your website when you interact with it to determine what changes you should make when it comes to the information on your website, so that when people are using those AI tools, it's effectively designed for that. For example, bullet point lists, short lists are really helpful for AI tools and being able to interact with information. So if you have long paragraphs of information, that's not necessarily the best way to be able to share information that's there. So you can use AI tools to help evaluate your website so that it can be best designed and set up for interaction by AI tools. All right, so this is one of the helpful ways that you can do this in ministry. Sermon content and producing. You know, they can look at your social media and your other place, your podcasts. They can talk about the reach that's out there, your social media voice, and also, for example, your visitor readiness. Somebody's looking at coming to your church and how much information is it that they can find about what that information is. Here's why this is valuable. Most of these people that are using AI tools to find out this information that's pulled from your website will never visit your church website. They will only go off of the information that the AI tool tells them about your website. That's why it is that your website has to be designed and has to be set up for GEO, so that they can get the information that they're looking for. So don't be surprised if you follow things like analytics, like your web traffic and things like that. Don't be surprised if you've already seen and continue to see a decline in your web traffic usage, because it used to be somebody would search Google, then they would click on a link, and they'd go visit your website. Now that's not necessarily going to be the case. They're going to ask an AI tool, they're going to get a response, and that's as far as they go. So just keep that in mind when it comes to the website and how it is that you can audit your church's, things like your church's digital communication to help you with this particular tool that's here. Now, I'll say with this, let's say you look at this, you go, this is overwhelming. I don't know where to start with this. Well, one of the things that you can actually do with AI, I love how you can use AI to help you with AI. All right, one of the things that you can do is you can actually, when we talk about back in that format principle, and the fact that you give it a role that it's doing, you can actually ask AI, I want you to operate like a seasoned prompt engineer. I'm trying to accomplish X. Help me with a prompt, a helpful prompt that I can use to be able to accomplish this purpose. And it'll go about writing for you a prompt, and you can look at it and you can say, okay, that's actually what I want, or no, I want to copy and paste that and say I want that to be different that's there. So you can actually, if you don't know what to post in the AI tool, you can actually ask it to help you as a prompt engineer to write those particular things. So let's say you want to assess your digital content from your church, and you want to make sure it's GEO, and you don't know what GEO optimize, and you don't know what it is that I should ask. You can go into the tool and say, act as a prompt engineer. I want to use an AI tool to be able to help assess my website for generative engine optimization. What prompt can I use? And it'll come through and it'll spit a prompt out. You can evaluate it, determine if it's what you want, and then use that for that particular purpose. Nico, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so we talked a little bit about the search engine optimization versus the GEO, but just as a reminder here, with search engine optimization, which is still important, it's not something that you should set aside, especially because a lot of the AI tools are doing web searches as well with their information, but it helps you rank high on Google, has keywords, backlinks, things along those lines. GEO is to be cited by AI generative answers. They're looking for clear, structured information on your website. And it's when someone asks, is there a good church near me that does X? Then that AI tool is able to find it if your church is properly set up from a GEO standpoint. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So, it's important because of the fact it reads your website. Structured content's going to win things like FAQs, clear bullet points, things along those lines. It's going to read your reviews. So it's going for all kinds of information, especially if they're using deep research mode. It's going to read your reviews on Facebook, on Google, things along those lines. And as I'd mentioned, it's already happening. I don't know if you've had that interaction. As I said at Open Door, we've had that where we've had those 5 people over those last 3 months that have told us this is how we found out about Open Door Church, was because we went to ChatGPT or we went to Claude and we asked information about the church, or we asked information what we were looking for, and they said, Open Door is a church that you should consider with the information that's there. So that's why it is that GEO matters to churches. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and let's talk about a question that maybe you might have, and that is, what role can AI play in sermon preparation? This is a big topic. Let me say this before we get into this topic. When it comes to our ability or our desire to do well from a ministry standpoint, we haven't come up with new ways to disobey God or sin. We have new tools to do it with, but it's still the same thing that we're facing. So let's go ahead, Nico, and go to the next slide. I always want to put in front of pastors 2 Timothy 2:15, the reminder from Paul to Timothy, to be diligent to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, correctly teaching the word of truth. What's my paraphrase of that verse for you? Pastors, please don't be lazy. This is not, an AI tool is not a way for you to offload your brain and say this is going to be easier. Because what you are doing is you're short-circuiting the process of your interaction with God's word, the Holy Spirit's interaction with your life, you spending time in prayer with our Heavenly Father. You're short-circuiting that process. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't ways that you can use AI from a sermon preparation standpoint, but I want you to think about it in the standpoint of, am I being faithful to 2 Timothy 2:15? Am I being faithful to loving the Lord God also from the great commandment with all my heart and my soul and my mind and my strength? So remember, it's not a replacement for you, but it can be a helpful research assistant. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So where are some ways that you can help it? Number one, assistant, not a ghostwriter. You can give a pretty good prompt and say, with all kinds of restrictions, and even with using examples of past sermons that you've done, and it can write a pretty good sermon. But it's not a sermon that you've spent time laboring through. It's not a sermon that you've spent time praying through. It's not a sermon that you've spent time washing over your own life before it is that you talk to your congregation. And so therefore, it's an assistant, not a ghostwriter. You can help it to research and to brainstorm. Also for background and context. Sometimes you have certain questions that are there. Even if you use Logos these days, Logos has AI tools that are even built into the Bible software now, where you're able to interact and it's able to more easily pull this information together that's here. So asking things about historical, cultural, linguistic context for a passage are helpful. Interpretive tensions. So as you are doing your work and you are interacting with commentaries, you're sometimes going to find commentaries that are going to disagree with each other on particular points. Well, you can use AI to help summarize some of those tensions for you and how it is and be able to understand. You can have it simplify. You can be dealing with a concept that you're like, I'm not quite sure that I'm getting the concept that this commentator is talking about. Well, you can take that excerpt, sometimes even just a screenshot, you can say, explain this to me on a 5th grade level. And it'll help kind of walk you through and explain those particular things. Illustration ideas. I don't know about you. I'm one that is not, there are some people out there that are incredibly creative. That's not me. And so I'm not one of those that just likes to come up with creative ideas out of the box. I like to kind of have a starting point. AI is really helpful in starting points with some things. So like, in other words, if I'm struggling with an illustration for a sermon, I can be talking about the concept that I'm talking about and say, what are some ideas? Rarely is that something that I just take and say, oh, that's it. But what it'll do is it'll spark an idea in my brain and go, oh, okay, I know what I can do here. And so it's helpful from that particular perspective with illustrations. Also, it helps with alternate perspectives. Helps with alternate perspectives. For example, you can take your sermon and you can upload it into one of these chat bots, and you can say, basically, act like you fill in the blank of somebody within your church, teenager, a divorced single mom, things along those lines, and say, what kind of questions would this raise? And it helps even from that standpoint of alternate perspectives, thinking about what is it that I'm doing from an application standpoint, not from an interpretive standpoint, all right, because we know that that doesn't affect the interpretation, but it can affect the application that's there, and also other theological traditions. And then also it can help with clarity and condensing. Sometimes you can be a little bit wordy in some areas, and in that wordiness, you can start to trip over your words, and you can be unclear in particular areas. Well, it can help take some things and say, evaluate this. If you don't want it to rewrite it, because you don't want it to say AI is writing my sermon, but you can say, give me feedback on how it is that I can condense this and how it is that I can make this more clear. And it'll come back with some feedback. Sometimes you'll go, that's pretty good feedback. Sometimes you'll go, I don't like that feedback. But it can be helpful for you from that standpoint of evaluating what needs to be condensed and what needs to be more clear that's there. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So what are some cautions for you to watch out for? There's something called AI hallucinations. AI hallucinations is basically where AI just makes stuff up. All right? This happens a lot of times. By the way, if you ever say, give me a quote from such and such, I can almost guarantee you that person didn't say that. Okay? That's not a good use of an AI tool. So if you're using it and you're quoting somebody because AI said so-and-so said it, you better double check it, because there's a good chance that they didn't. The other thing is that the longer that you interact with an AI tool in a particular chat, it's what's called a context window. As that context window gets bigger, sometimes those AI tools can lose their train of thought on what it is that they're focusing on. And so therefore, they can end up giving you some bad information that's there. So never take what AI says at face value. Always be in a situation where there is the human oversight that goes with the AI tool. You're always looking at it, you're evaluating, you're checking the source if this is the case. And also, AI doesn't know your context. You might be able to give it some context information that helps understand and helps craft certain things and raise certain questions, but it doesn't fully understand your context. And that's where it is that you need to be intimately involved in what's going on, not only through your own personal study, but through prayer, leadership of the Holy Spirit when it comes to that particular situation. But always remember that AI is constantly improving. So the things that it is bad at now, next year it might not be bad at. When AI chatbots first came out, they were horrible at math. They only knew the answers to math equations that had been trained on in their large language models. They weren't actually doing math. They were just going off of basically the historical information. Now they're actually pretty good at it. So that's an example of when it started, something wasn't good and now it's really good. So just because you have a bad interaction with it at some point in time, don't think that a year from now that's still the same thing. So for example, one of my staff members about 2 years ago took a picture of his bookshelf, and he basically said, give me a spreadsheet of all the books that are on the shelf, and it completely missed it. He did it the other day, and it was 100% correct. All right, so that's just an idea here of how it is that there's constant improvement that's here. So for me personally, from a sermon preparation perspective, is I need to make sure that I'm not tempted to not spend the time in prayer that I need to spend, to not spend the time reading through the passage, doing my observations, praying, seeking the Spirit's leadership on this. But where I do use it is to help with some certain things. For example, last fall with a sermon that I was doing, I generally preach from a manuscript. And I was going to a meeting up in Richmond. I had done all of my study. And so what I actually did is I turned on my recorder on my phone, and I preached my sermon on the way up to Richmond. All my starts and stops that I had, thinking through, correcting different things. And then I took that recording, turned it into a transcription, just raw, and then basically went to one of the AI tools, and I said, I don't want you to rewrite this. I basically just want you to put it, take it from just raw, straight text and put it into paragraph form for me. Got it to about 85% of where I needed to from that structure standpoint without any rewriting at all, just taking the things that I had was preaching. I'm sure the people riding next to me were probably wondering, what in the world is this guy doing as I'm preaching? But it was really helpful from that standpoint. It was really helpful for me in a conclusion on a recent sermon that I was preaching. We're in 2 Samuel at Open Door, and where David is coming back from after Absalom had chased him out of the country. And it actually suggested one particular question in a closing, and I went, that was a really, really, really good question. And it really captured something that I was trying to accomplish in the sermon that's there. It was much more clear than how I had said it. And so I was able to use that and say, okay, this is helpful in this particular situation to do this. I'm able to do it. I'm horrible at things like grammar and spelling. It's good at those particular tools. It can help in those particular tools to make sure that those things are addressed. And so I frequently use it from that standpoint. I'll use it, again, for assessing clarity. I'll ask it to play certain roles and to say, okay, you're a teenager in the church listening to this sermon. What kinds of questions does it raise? And it'll come back with questions. Some of them I go, I don't really care about those questions. But every once in a while, it'll ask a question. I'll go, I need to figure out how to address that question in my sermon, because that's really apropos for what we're trying to do that's here. So again, this is after all of the work. This isn't I start here and this is where this goes, but this is after the work. Because I'm always thinking of 2 Timothy 2:15, that I'm having to show myself approved in this particular effort, because this is how I honor God. And so that's just a way for us to consider how it is that we would use this. Go ahead, Nico, if you would, to the next slide. So some final thoughts, and then we'll open it up for some questions that I want to encourage you when it comes to AI tools is think about it as your assistant. Don't think about it as a replacement, and don't delegate your brain. There's already lots of studies about people who have just decided basically that I'm offloading my brain and I'm just letting it make decisions, and therefore I'm not able to make decisions on my own anymore because of it. And so don't delegate your brain in that situation. Do the work. And then, as I say, show yourself approved. Pastors, don't be lazy. I know you're not, but I know life is busy. Many of you can be in bivocational situations, and you're in the crunch moment trying to figure something out, and there's that potential moment at that time to be able to consider, is this just easier to do it this way? But don't fall into that particular temptation. As I say, AI tools don't give us a new way to sin. It's just a new tool to use to do it with that's there. We still face the same things. We still could have faced the challenge of taking somebody else's sermon and preaching it instead of preaching our own from those standpoints. And we can do the same thing with AI. So as I say, I think it can be incredibly helpful to you in ministry. But like everything else in this world, we have to be wise in how it is that we do and how it is that we interact with these tools. And realize, too, as you think about leading your congregation, as I say at the beginning, you have to help train them and teach them how to critically use these tools. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be an AI expert yourself and know all the ins and outs of AI, but you do have to be able to help shepherd them and guide them to think about how it is that they view these tools, that they shouldn't use it from a therapy and companionship perspective, because it's not a real person. As much as it might come across with really good answers, it's not a real person. It doesn't replace the community. It doesn't replace the godly counsel that comes from the gathered people of God. And so think about that from that role as you preach, as you think about application points. Don't leave these out from your application points as you encourage your people as they think about how it is that they live their life. So what I'd love to do now is open it up for some questions to be able to answer regarding this. And hopefully I'll be able to answer them. If I can't answer them, I may be able to point you to some place that can answer them for you. Got one over here.
What kind of work has been done, and have you seen a lot of, I guess the best way to ask the question is, have you heard of some best case uses for how to automate systems within church ministry? And how could that help?
Yeah, that's a great question. Those tools are becoming easier to use every day. And that's, I think, one of the big blessings that AI can have, especially on small churches that might not have access to staff, to hire staff members in certain areas to be able to do certain things. And so for example, I'll use a work example from an automation standpoint for me. I use at work Claude for a significant amount of work that I do. And I'll use something called Claude Cowork. And one of the things is Claude Cowork can take, when I go to bill.com with a particular credit card transaction, and I can actually train it, and it can step through and it can do all the interaction with that website for me, even looking at the receipt and figuring out particular numbers and where it is that they need to go and things along those lines. So there are lots of tools out there that can help you from an automation standpoint, whether it be engaging with visitors with the information that you receive there. It can be helping with especially repetitive administrative tasks can be really helpful to come up with AI tools that are there to be able to use. And the other thing that's nice about AI tools is if you are somebody that's more inclined towards a technical side of things, you can actually create your own tools, not just use tools that have been created by other people. So I would say it's not something where, again, it's going to be, this is going to be for you necessarily initially transformative. I would say that day's coming from there, and those tools are pretty wide-ranging that can be used. Some of them are going to be built into the tools that you use now. If you're using a church management system, things along those lines, those are starting to introduce some of those tools that are with it. But there's lots of ways you can do that through scheduling your communications and being able to summarize what needs to be communicated to the congregation, making it clear, evaluating what's going on in those particular communications. As I say, administrative tasks regarding certain things with paperwork can be done, things along those lines. But I would probably say from a church perspective, start thinking about those automation tools when it comes to especially interacting with visitors. How can I take that information and be able to communicate with them in a quicker, more concise format that might even be tailored to specific things about them that are with it. But all that to say, again, I think those tools are going to become easier for churches to use in the future. They're there now, but especially for a smaller church that maybe doesn't have a technical orientation or person with technical orientational staff, they might be a little bit harder to implement. But those are coming from that way. I don't know if that helps answer the question or not. Yes?
Give a couple of So as Michael mentioned earlier, I'm a bivocational pastor and I work in AI. I'll tell you, this may not be a question necessarily, but may help the rest of the folks. But a couple of areas where I have seen that I've used AI, even in sermon prep and things like that, where you need to be careful. So I was preaching a sermon 6 months ago and explained what I was planning on preaching on, and application and all that. Said I've used sort of this same story as an example several times, and it's kind of old now. Is there another story that I could use as an example that could help me, show this sermon illustration? And immediately, I can't remember if it was Claude or Chat, but ended up giving me the prompt, gave a nice little paragraph with the dates and times and everything, and I responded, "That's a really interesting story. It sounds very miraculous. I'm surprised I haven't heard about it." And then it responded, "Oh, right, because I just made that up." Right. So, it was a great sermon illustration, but it was a complete lie.
Yep.
Right. So this thing didn't happen in 1929 in San Francisco.
Right.
So be very careful of, sort of those stories. Another area, because again, the AIs are designed to please you. They want to give you the answer. So another example, I was asking for an evaluation of James 5, and if any of you are sick, let the elders come and pray, and that person, if they've been sick, if they have any sins, they'll be forgiven and all that. Give it, explain that in a good way for a sermon illustration, and it came back and it did. And I said, well, yes, but you're saying that if anybody in your church is sick, they could have the elders pray, and that person will be healed. I said, but the word that's used in James 5 is anestheneo, it's not maladia. So he's not talking about physical healing in the full context of James. He's talking about, weakness in the faith and struggling. And if you think this is physical healing, you've completely missed the entire context of the book of James. Oh, and the response was, "Oh, you're absolutely right." And then it from that response, it then rewrote itself. So to the point of, don't be lazy, study your Greek and Hebrew, understand, so that you can evaluate the responses. So, and to Michael's point earlier, yes, my company does do AI for insurance claims. And when you call in Geico and you say that you're driving, at night and you slipped on ice and you ran into a tree, it's going to listen to your voice and see if you're lying. It is going to check the weather at that time that day. It's going to look at other things that I can't disclose. And it will basically, within about 0.6 seconds, tell the insurance company whether you're lying to them or not. And if you do lie or even exaggerate, yes, you will then be reported to the authorities. So don't lie to your insurance company. So, but the point is, all of us, whether you recognize or not, you are using AI on a daily basis, whether you mean to or not. So just a couple comments.
That's a good point. Yeah, matter of fact, AI can give you a right response, and you can tell it it's wrong, and it'll say, "You're right, I am wrong." So you can have fun with everybody. Any other questions? Yes, right over here.
Thank you so much for this information. My question is not so much about the passive, because I do understand 2 Timothy 2:15, you got to study. When doing, say you're having a church conference, in the notation part, how would AI work or either assist you in that area if you're recording the minutes at that meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question, using AI for minutes. You can use, there's lots of tools that are out there that'll take the audio and transcribe it, or tools that'll actually, AI tools that you can actually use. There's like a device called Plod. There's other ones that are out there that will actually record the meeting and actually do the minutes for you. And it's amazing how good that they are in actually creating those particular minutes. And so it's a really helpful tool if you're to do that yourself, is you can take that audio and you can basically either use a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or others to have it do the transcription and put it into minutes for you, or you can use another tool that would transcribe the audio. Otter AI is one of those. And then you can use it to create the minutes. You can give it an example and say, this is what our minutes look like, and it will actually take that and follow that particular format that's there. So it can be a huge help from that perspective of somebody sitting there trying to take detailed minutes, when you can actually record the meeting, especially if it's all going through the audio system and being recorded. and can therefore easily take that and create that into a set of minutes. They might not be perfect, but it's a whole lot less work than trying to do it by hand at that perspective. One of the things, by the way, I'd encourage for you guys on there when I say don't delegate your brain, versus just simply asking an answer or asking a question and getting an answer, one of the things you can do to engage your brain is you can have it ask you questions. And that can actually engage your brain. Say, I'm trying to do this. I want you to walk me through a series of questions to help me think through this particular topic. And therefore, you're actually starting to engage your brain when it comes to that, not just simply asking for an answer. James.
We had a guy in our church who took it upon himself to summarize the pastor's main points
Yep.
and pass it out to other members in the church.
Yeah.
And I got a hold of a copy of it, and I was looking at it, and about half of it was AI's summarization of what they thought the pastor meant when he said X, Y, Z. So
Yeah.
I had to stop that quick.
Yeah. Yeah. You always have to have that, as I say, that human oversight, the human in the loop, in the product that's being done. But it can really help from that standpoint if done right.
Do you find that some of the models out there, like Grok, ChatGPT, some are better for research, others are better for like graphics?
It
Those type
it
things?
depends on who's come out with the latest model, quite honestly. So it's not a static situation. It's very fluid right now. So, for example, if you take image creation, there was a period of window there where Google's Gemini, what they call their Nano Banana Pro, was the top model, and then ChatGPT came out. Well, now you've got what was released yesterday from Microsoft with what are called the MAI models, which are shown on par with the other major models that you know right now, but have the benefit of operating 10 times cheaper than those do. And so it's such a fluid environment right now that what I tell you is I think this is the best tool to use today. A month from now won't be the case. So I would say all of the major models are really good at their functions. Now, in the programming world, Claude is the one that right now is kind of the king because it's decided to really heavily focus on that with their Claude Code product. But things like simple things like evaluating manuscripts, editing, things along those lines, any of the models are pretty much going to be equal in what they're able to handle that's there. And what I didn't talk about within this, and I'll just mention, each of those major models or chat bots that are out there with ChatGPT, Grok, they all have, you have the ability to select models that are within those. Some are designed to do more heavier tasks. Some are designed to do light tasks and can give you quicker responses. So it's not just simply using something like Claude, but it's actually which model in Claude you're using that could be more effective in a particular way. Any other questions?
One other comment. You mentioned how you can use some of these tools to help build processes for you. So one of the things that I did with Claude actually was I built an app, and it took about 45 seconds. So an iPhone app. So now when people in our church ask for prayer requests, it will record those, and then it will remind me through my iPhone to pray for them at a certain amount of time. And when during the day randomly, and then when I'm reminded to pray for them, I hit the button, and it automatically texts them and says, "Your pastor just prayed for you about this today." And it's just a really great way to connect with people. And that, again, it took about 45 seconds to build something like that. So, and I also noticed that I had an employee that he and I were not connecting very well, and there was some friction. And so I asked the AI to try and read through his email to come up with what it thought was his tone. And it confirmed that he was getting frustrated with me. So then I used this machine to then respond in a very kind way, because I thought that I was not responding very sensitively.
Right.
It was able then to rewrite the email that I was responding, and it said, if you say it this way, you might offend him more. And so you can use that. But when I did that, I also realized that as a Southern gentleman, I was saying to ChatGPT, please do the following. And I've had to train myself, don't say please.
Yeah. There you
Don't
go.
tell the machine
There you go.
thank
Thank
you.
you, things along
Don't
those
say
lines.
thank
Right.
you,
Right.
because you have to train your brain. This is a
Yeah.
machine, not a person.
Yep.
And so that I think it's important for us to keep
good.
those distinctions.
It's good. I have one employee that I'll have to admit every time I get an email from him, they're multiple paragraphs and they're very confusing. And so one of the things I've loved since the rise of AI is I'll take his email and I'll basically say, please summarize this for me, and help me understand what it is that he's trying to say. And it's great because it's really alleviated a lot of my frustrations in interacting with it, and I'm able to respond a little bit better or ask better questions that come back from it.
So I got a question specifically about using like maybe a sermon analogy that you've developed from AI. I mean, we would all agree that if I listen to a David Platt sermon and copy something, that's wrong. But what is the intellect? What's the moral? Should I tell my congregation this is a borrowed analogy? Should I pawn it off as my own? And then is there intellectual property issues within that?
No, I don't think there's any. I don't think right now you have to worry about anything from an intellectual property standpoint. But there's some issues with that. But I think that it's probably helpful, especially if something is completely derived from AI, to do something like, I asked AI this question, and it provided this. Be upfront with the fact that I did this. I don't think you have to put a footnote on there that goes with this, but if something is, you feel like the majority of this particular thing that I'm saying was AI developed, just go ahead and say, you know what, I was thinking about this, so I asked AI this question, and here's what it came back with. And, something along those lines. And so definitely, I think it's best to be as transparent as possible from that. I do a weekly for my care groups that I oversee as a part of my shepherding role at Open Door. I send out this weekly devotional. As I mentioned, I'm not great with grammar and spelling, and so I have it go through and I have it make corrections. And I am very clear with people. I write this. I can show you the original of what I wrote. As a matter of fact, for that purpose, keep all of the original formats that I actually wrote it in. And will say, I used AI to help me with my grammar and spelling that's here to make it kind of more polished than it is. But if there's ever any question, I have my original to show that this was my original thinking that I came up with here. It might have been adjusted for the right grammar, right spelling, a little bit more concise, but I can show you that the work that's here, I'm just using it from that perspective. I'm not using AI to actually write it. Yes, Nico.
I actually have a question myself. I use Google Gemini as my primary AI
Yeah, it's a
source.
great product.
It comes with Google Workspace.
Yep.
And because we're a church, we're a nonprofit, we get it. I guess we get it for free. I guess what I'm asking is Google Gemini itself, is it free as long as you have a Gmail account, or do you need a Workspace account to get it?
Yeah, so there is a free model that anybody that's got a Gmail account can use. But then they also have a pro model that's available within the Google Workspace settings. And there's certain levels that can be purchased. But you as an individual, matter of fact, I was talking, my friend Andy Wynn that came with us today, I was telling him about Google One, which is what Google's product is that allows you to do things like extra storage. So like if you're using Google Photos and stuff like that, and you might have run out of your 15 gig of storage and you need extra storage, and so they offer the Google One product. The Google One level that comes with the 5 terabytes of storage for $19.99 a month actually comes with full access to Gemini Pro. And 5 family members can access it. So I'm not doing a sales pitch, I'm just telling you here, if you're looking for a way to do this, 5 family members can access it rather than them having to have individual license to Google Pro. But if you have your cell phone service through Verizon, you can actually get that same plan for $10 a month to be able to access it. Google Gemini's model is a great AI model, highly encourage it. But yes, anybody with a Gmail account can interact with it for free. But then there are those paid versions, and some of those paid options come in the workspace as well.
I just to add to that is like as a nonprofit organization, Google offers
Yes.
it.
Google Work,
for
yes,
free.
for free for
So if
ministry-
you're
for
looking to get it,
not-for-profits.
you just need to make sure you have
Yep.
your nonprofit status,
Yep.
submitted it to them, and then you get Workspace
Yep.
for free.
That's a
And then
great
you
tip.
have
Great tip.
Gemini to work from.
That's a great tip. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can I take a boundary as a church planter, boundary roads in like the Glenwood area where I minister, and tell that to AI, and then it give me the feedback of the demographics of the people that are in that community, what appeals to them, what are the danger points that you need to be aware of that would be in that community, what people are certainly sensitive about, certain hot spots, and then all of a sudden, so you don't step into something that you got to dig out of.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well it's going to answer all those questions. I would say from the boundaries that you use, because most of that information that's available on the web is based upon either cities or zip codes. And so I would focus on things like zip codes and have it focus, and if you're doing your research, asking for demographic information and other things that you can learn from particular zip codes, because to answer those questions, it's not going to look at its necessarily at its training model. It's going to go out and do a web search, and most of that information that's available on the web is going to be categorized and by zip code and city versus necessarily a street boundary, if that helps. Yep. 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 Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah, anything that's available from a data set, from a web perspective, using the deep research model is what's going to be most effective with those. And as Nico was just mentioning, as a church, you can have access to Gemini Pro to do that deep research for free as a not-for-profit. And you can basically go through and ask it for that demographic information, and it'll do a really good job pulling what current information's out there. Yep. All right. Michael?